Well, welcome back to the Pastor Pod. We're so glad you're with us for another episode. And if you're with us, let us know that you're listening. You can email us at thepastorpod@gmail.com, or you can give us a little shout out on social media. And we've had a great season just getting this podcast started. And today I'm here with Jay Mudd. Of course, if you've been listening, you know Jay, and he's up in the Northeast. And I just can't tell you how excited I am to have my older brother, Dr. Jeff Robinson, here with us today on the Pastor Pod. So Jeff, welcome from West Palm.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So how far is Jeff from you, Josh? Because you live, I don't know where you live.
Yeah, Jay still doesn't know where I live.
One of the islands. You live on one of the islands out there in Florida.
I live off the island. I live in Venice. Yeah, there's a Venice Beach island, of course. Yeah, so if you look at Florida, we're almost directly just on the other side of the state, just about. So does it take you about 2 hours, 20 minutes, something like that, Jeff? Is that about right for you?
I try to lead my family well and not speed excessively. So usually for us, it takes around 3 or so.
Oh, okay. Or you take better roads, that too. But
so do you speed, Jeff?
Well, I hear that up in the Northeast, they are like giving you naughty or nice signs based upon your speed. I don't know if that's true or not. Rumor I heard.
That's what I was sharing right before we hit the record button. Was absolutely in my family. Yes, we did. I will confess to you, we did the trip we went by it 3 times in order to get the naughty sign. Just for
saw it. You shared
pictogram. Just for
it was on your Instagram story, wasn't it?
It was on my Instagram story, and I had a lot of feedback, and people said that in consensus, they said that I did not need that sign to say that I was a naughty driver. So apparently people don't like the way I drive. People don't like the way I drive.
Parenting tips. Parenting tips.
Yeah. I have not been in an accident with one of my kids.
That's a good thing.
I did total 5 cars before I was 20. 5 cars before I was 20. And
really?
I have flipped a
What about
tank.
the tank, though? What about the tank?
I did. I flipped a tank, Jeff. Did you know that in the Army I flipped a tank?
No.
Yes, completely flipped a tank over. So yeah, I've been around the block a little bit. I've had my fair share of accidents.
Well, I can't wait not to ride with you.
That's
come on down. I'll show you around. I'll drive you around Boston.
Hey guys, I'll drive. No, I'm good. I'll just walk. No, that's good.
I do think it's kind of cool. We all met at the college we attended in Graceville, where the living is easy because there's absolutely nothing there. And so we had to get creative. And one of the things I know about Jeff that I thoroughly enjoyed was Jeff, you created a fight club at a Bible college. I mean, you got to go down in history for that, right? I mean, are we not? Oh, was the rule?
There's probably some of that may be a wee bit urban legend.
Or
probably Fight Club.
I forgot the rule. Yeah. The first rule of the Fight Club. I forgot.
Words matter. Definitions.
Yeah. So Jeff, before I went to BCF, Jeff was there, of course. Jay, what year did you start at the Baptist College of Florida? If you don't know the abbreviation.
So long ago. I graduated in 2016.
Okay.
No, I didn't.
No,
I didn't. I'm sorry. I graduated in 2006.
Wow. Okay. So just 10 years off. That's okay.
That's also the year I got married. I should know this, but yes, 2006 is when I graduated. So
there's actually video footage of this, I wouldn't call it Fight Club, but just a gathering of men punching each other.
Messed up. Jeff, I hope I don't ruin your reputation. I'm sorry about that.
We just, felt led that in a controlled environment with mutual assent to be able to provide another, sport for some of our young men there, classmates, brothers in Christ. See you guys, lights get turned off real quick and turned right back on. It was awesome though. Like it was truly amazing. It was good. A little bit more intense than like intramural basketball, unless you played certain professors that were ballers back in the day, that were still ballers, that had a market on how to block out, and also the use of the Muay Thai elbow. Yes. I love you, doctor. I will not name your name, but yeah.
I still have TMJ from him. just like
Absolutely.
pop, pop, right there on my right here.
A man among men.
Yep.
Wow.
Yeah.
I never played this basketball with this such professor. So
It was awesome.
Good times.
He's my hero still this day.
there you go. And you don't want to give him a shout out. You don't want to call his name. Come on, at the Pastor Pod, we let people know what we're thinking about things.
Yeah, the Pastor
I've
Pod's all
probably
about what
already
pastors
said
really
too
think.
much. I've probably already said too much. But if you were at BCF back in the day, you probably remember you carry in your body the scars. So
yeah, that's right. Well, if you don't know, Jeff's the lead pastor at Grace Fellowship Church over in West Palm. And Jeff, how many years have you been there?
almost 6.
Yeah.
Nice.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So we're glad you're with us. If you don't know Jeff, definitely check. You could follow him on social and check out Grace Fellowship. But they've been doing a lot of great work there. And it's the tag of the tag title or subtitle or whatever church is, a church for the nations, and just an amazing picture.
Church for all nations. Yeah.
Church for all nations. Yeah, I butchered that.
Yeah.
So
get it right.
Get it right or get out. Yeah. So it's a fun day to have you on the podcast, Jeff. And he's been writing some books and doing a lot of great research. So we wanted to just pick your brain and talk about how we can really lean into how do we help people overcome doubt, and how do we help guide people through that process of not only knowing the word, knowing the truth, but how do we deal with doubt? So Jay has definitely set up some cool questions today on how we can discuss that, but looking forward to it.
All right. So we're going to return here in just a moment, and we will talk about Jeff's book coming out on doubt and some other fun things. So hang tight. All right. Welcome back to the Pastor Pod. And again, we are here with Jeff Robinson, and he is going to share with us a little bit about a book that he's in the process of writing. And Jeff, speaking of books, it's hard for me not to notice, if you're watching with us on YouTube, your book selection is far greater than your younger brother Josh's, and so you've read a lot more books, most likely, and you have definitely written more books, unless I've not done my research. And so Josh is he's just owning this one, right, Josh?
Exactly right, Jeff. I don't know how many books he has, but he reads voraciously. Is that a good word? Voracious. Is that even a word? Did I mess that word up? That's a
word.
Okay, see, I don't even know words, but yeah, Jeff is an excellent student and has been in school for a very, very long time.
I can tell I'm out of my league here. And so we're going to jump right into our topic for the day. And Jeff, you are writing a book currently. I don't believe it's not published yet, right? Correct? Is that accurate?
Right.
So you've let me into a little bit of the book. You've sent me a little bit, and I was pretty fascinated. In your book, you really start off with something that captivated me. You this aspect of defining doubt, because understanding what doubt is and what doubt is not, and if it's possible for Christians to have doubt. So would you tell us a little bit about where the book came from?
Sure.
And thoughts of that?
Yeah, I think the book, the original idea, definitely comes from the work of Dr. Gary Habermas. He's taught for years, great philosopher, theologian. He was also a hockey coach, years and years for Liberty University. They even won some titles when he was their hockey coach. Loves MMA, loves football. So he's like this combination. He's become a great friend of like a guy who likes contact sports, but also this world-class philosopher. And I had a seminar with him several years ago on religious doubt. And a lot of these ideas, I want to give full attribution. I don't want to plagiarize, but to say just from my interaction with him, friendship percolates a lot of this. So that's really where I think the interest in doubt comes from for me personally. So
tell us a little bit about how would you define doubt then, based off of what I've read in your book? I've read a little bit. I didn't read the whole thing, but impossible for me to read the whole thing. But tell me a little bit about how you're defining doubt. What is doubt? What is doubt not?
Sure. Yeah. Well, I think the term in itself, like we always know, no matter what we're talking about, let's define our terms before we talk about it, whether it's marriage or a leadership conversation at church or giving campaign or whatever it is, politics. What do we mean by this term? So with doubt, Generally speaking, there's three areas that doubt can come from. I want to address that, and then we'll try to define it. Emotional doubt would be a place of someone that's going through a lot of struggle in their life, a lot of stress, maybe death or job loss or something traumatic, to where we're not feeling, right, the presence of God, or feeling that Christianity is true. And then we start articulating that, saying, well, I don't think, or I no longer believe. But it's not so much an issue of data or reason or logic. It's just that we're in a state emotionally that sort of keeps us from embracing the truth. And then there's factual doubt, which is just saying, man, I just don't believe that the biblical record is true, or I don't believe that Christ actually rose from the dead. David Hume, dead men don't rise. So therefore, if he's dead, he doesn't rise if he's a man. And then there's volitional doubt, which is really the toughest, I think, area. And people who've done a lot more work on this would say that's where somebody really doesn't care anymore. Like volitional, from the will to say, hey, man, that's great. Bible is the word of God. Jesus is the Son of God. Don't care. Just kind of shrug my shoulders and walk away. So as far as the definition, that's sort of like the watershed of understanding maybe the different areas or sources that doubt can come from. But Elmer Towns made this quote like decades ago, and it's so good. He said, doubt is stumbling over a stone that we do not understand, but unbelief is kicking at a stone that we understand all too well. So just in that statement, I think for a lot of Christians, even Christian leaders, when we hear the word doubt, a lot of times we automatically associate that with a hardened state of unbelief. I mean, Jesus talks about unbelief time and time again, how serious of a thing that is. But doubt is more, in that context, more of a hesitation, more of, I don't really know. Maybe I've not had someone explain to me the reasons why I'm feeling this way, if it's emotional doubt, or even the case for why I can believe as a thinking person that Jesus actually rose from the dead.
Got it. Okay. So there's a lot there. And so I'll try my best to drop some of those quotes and things like that in the show notes. So I believe some of the hardest moments for us to trust, and where doubt kind of, rises to the surface most often, tends to be when God is, I'm going to say, silent. I'm saying that just because I believe that's the emotion that we would often associate with those times in life where God is silent. He's not acting, maybe not acting the way we want him to act or whatever it may be. But in those moments is where we often see some form or level of doubt taking place. Why do you think that's the easiest place and typically where doubt shows up? Or do you even believe that's where doubt shows up the most?
Yeah, I think we see, at least from that sense, even in Scripture, John the Baptist in Matthew 11, when he was in prison, right? He had been thrown in prison. He's trying to do the work of the Lord. But when he heard about what Jesus was doing, he even told his disciples to go ask Jesus and ask Jesus' disciples, are you the one who is to come, or shall we look for another? And a lot of theologians, guys who studied, this issue of doubt, say that that's an example of possibly in the life of John the Baptist, who Jesus said was the greatest man born among women. Think about where he was. He's in prison, not knowing what's going to happen in the future. He's like, let me just make sure, right? Because I don't want to suffer for no reason. I want to make sure that Jesus is legit. And Jesus told them, go tell John what you hear and see, right? I mean, the blind receive their sight, the lame walk, the lepers are cleansed, the deaf hear, dead are raised up, like all of that. So what Jesus did in that moment, to where John the Baptist, let's say it this way, he hesitated, is Jesus responded with truth. Well, go tell him what you've seen. Right? Eyewitness testimony. And then in the life of Elijah, we're familiar with that story, incredible beast, Super Bowl moment, Mount Carmel, God shows up. He's opposed by these 400 plus prophets of Baal and Asherah. And God shows up, shows that he's the one true God. And he's talking smack to those guys, saying, well, maybe your false God, Baal, is, he's on vacation, or he's, He's in a porta potty somewhere, like literally. I mean, it's an amazing level. It's just him. But then right after that, he crashes, right? That he hears that Jezebel's going to come take him out. He runs away. He's absolutely, completely exhausted. And it's at that point that he begins to say those things that don't even make sense. Like, God, take my life. It's no good for me to even live. I'm no better than my fathers, which is not true. He was way more beastly than his fathers. So your question, Jay, from a point of the silence of God, a point of doubt, hesitation, the hiddenness of God, as your philosophers would say, I think often is from a place of exhaustion. For followers of Jesus Christ. We're just done. We're overwhelmed. And then sometimes because we're so tired, we can't even focus. We begin to sense that God is not there when in fact he is. And there's other reasons, but I think for Christian leaders, people who are pressing on for the Lord, that can be a common.
So do you think that emotional doubt is kind of one of the most rising levels of doubt among, I wouldn't even call people Christians, but just religious people, those that are not necessarily deconstructing their faith. Now, sometimes we have to deconstruct false truths about things we grew up learning that is actually not the gospel. But there's also a big, it's on social media. It's out there about people are deconstructing their faith, which there's a lot, that's kind of a loaded question, but do you think a lot of it's emotionalism more than it is even volitional, or like you said, what was the other, was it factual or not factual?
Factual doubt.
Factual doubt. Yeah.
Here's what Dr. Habermas says. And this is still to this day. He said it's been that way for years. So he not only does he do PhD work, professional work, in the academic world, but he also does a lot of counseling. He said 70% of the cases, and he's counseled over 500. This is not a one-time conversation. This is like a long-going relationship with people who just really have like systemic, deep soul level doubts about the Christian faith. He said 70% of all of the doubters. And this is a dude who's doing like lectures at Oxford and Cambridge and Harvard. Like he's not just showing, at a small group, like top level in the world stuff. He said within that context, 70% of the doubts were emotional.
Wow, 70%.
So if he's dealing with people like on that level and there's 70% there, then for the general population, I would say it would probably be higher than that. Yeah.
Wow.
And in terms of some people trying to deconstruct their faith, Josh, I mean, I think a lot of your ex-evangelicals, right? People who claim, I used to be an evangelical, but now I'm not. To be totally honest, a lot of this stuff is coming from artists, like former Christian artists. And I do think that is just a personal take that Christian contemporary artists don't have as much pull as they did back in the 80s and 90s. So some of it could be a ploy for attention. But when they say deconstruct their faith, I think most of your ex-evangelicals are not using that term in the way that actually came out, which is, and this is, I was told not to be nerdy on this podcast, but from Jacques Derrida to say, we can't know deconstruction is right. Like we can't know what an author means, like from any written source, which we could undercut that to say, well, how do I understand? I just read your book and you make this point. So apparently I can't understand you. It's logic. It's a logical train wreck. But I think, Josh, most of that is emotional in nature, because it doesn't have to do with the facts of the gospel. Like I don't see in a lot of our deconstruction, I see, like the rise and fall of Mars Hill, if we want to go there.
Yeah.
People from that interviewed in that saw some things, experienced some things that were not glorifying to the Lord. But for some, the result is to walk away from the faith. At no point are they interacting with whether or not it is true or meaningful. They're dealing with past hurts. And we can deal with that pastorally. I mean, you guys are pastors and walk people through that. But if you're going to walk away from it based upon feelings, then number one, it's not rational. And number two, did I actually understand it in the first place?
Well, that's a great way to describe it. And I think we all can say, whether you're a pastor or even a leader in a church, or you lead a small group, or you're using your career, your business to minister to people, regardless of whatever your role is, we deal with people every day that are doubting. They're doubting,
Mm-hmm.
Maybe not even these big existential questions of like salvation and is God sovereign or not, or is he this or that, but just the everyday emotional up and down, the roller coaster of all this stuff, dealing with this last year and a half, and all these peripheral things that have become just at the center of all of our conversations. How do we help people process their doubts in a godly way, a healthy way? I mean, how do we help people that are at that 70+% that maybe they lost someone way too early? Maybe they had a faith crisis with someone, or maybe they, a lot of it, I think, is church hurt. People are mistreated in a church setting where they have people that were supposed to be there for them, or they're supposed to lovingly confront them and show them grace, but also teach them what they need to know. And because of that painful situation, they've ended up doubting if God's good, or they project, that's who God is based on their family, their pastor, their church. So I know that's a lot, but how do we pastor and lead well? And what have you seen in your life of maybe helping people take those steps?
Sure.
In the right way.
I think for pastors and you guys, a lot of this stuff we know intuitively, and also for mom. I know mom's listening to this. Hi, Mom. I love you. We know not to treat with the wrong medicine. We're all familiar, right, with the person maybe going through something, and then all of a sudden somebody unloads, well, here's what the Kalam cosmological argument says about the existence of God, right? Boom, boom, boom. Give them the syllogism, give them the argument. So therefore God exists. So what are you whining about? We know that's not what the Lord would have us to do. But I'm reminded of a quote by Richard Sibes, where he says it's an office of love to take away the stones and to smooth the way to heaven. And I think the ministry of helping people who doubt, just like what you guys do on a daily basis, and so many of our leaders who are listening to this, what God is doing is helping you, enabling you, strengthening you to remove those doubts, so remove those stones, remove those roadblocks that are in front of people. And so I would say, in terms of practically helping people, the title of the book is Doubt Triggers: Discovering and Overcoming Our Hesitations to God. I think helping people in a pastoral, relational way understand that, hey, if I'm at a place to where I'm not sure God exists anymore, is that an issue of data? Is that an issue of reason or logic? Or could it come from a host of other areas? And there are several that I think are helpful. One would be flirting with sin. It's very easy for a believer to develop a habit to where we are flirting with sin or engaging in sin. And the way that we're wired is that if we're living in sin, we're going to have like an aversion and a pushback. We're going to be allergic to the things of God. We're going to experience more doubts because we can't live a lie, right? Long term, we've got to either change our behavior, right, or change our beliefs or our theology. And another one, like you're talking about, Josh, is the moral failure of an authority figure. And that doesn't even have to be church. That could be like a coach that you admired growing up, and then you find out years later that the coach was something else than what you thought he or she was. I think getting God wrong is a major cause of doubt, to where, and I know not in you guys' churches, but sometimes in church life, we can paint a picture of God to where we edit out all of what Jesus had to say about suffering. Jesus, the apostles, and the testimony of the early church, and even today, the persecuted church, hammers at home that if you're a follower of Christ, especially if you're in a majority non-Christian nation, you will suffer. And honestly, guys, I've had conversations with people like, man, my car broke down. I can't, like, I thought this was the car that, God gave me. I can't. And they're having like a crisis of faith. I'm like, it's a Chevy. Like, that's not does that make sense? It's not a cause for you to have a crisis of faith, but it's because they thought that, sometimes we say, well, if I have this worship song or this Bible study, God's going to give me a sense. And then that's going to be my perfect story. And then, absent abusive father figures, the list goes on and on.
So it's whether they have a grounded, not only factual, dad, all that stuff, but but almost a deep love and a trust that God is sovereign and faithful, and he is caring for us in the good and the bad, in the ups and the downs, the sufferings, and
That's
the
right.
wins and the celebrations. To have this resolve, knowing the word of God, knowing the providence of God, that even though when I doubt, kind of like John the Baptist, going back to him, I mean, what an incredible leader to study. And just, I mean, the guy that was, imagine your name being in the Bible. I mean, that's
in like
how
a
he
good
looked,
way.
like in a good way. And Jesus gives you a
Yeah,
shout
like
out like
Nebuchadnezzar's
that.
there. Yeah.
Right. And knowing that, and really the reason he was in prison is he didn't hold it in about, the nasty king, sleeping with
He would have been banned from Twitter,
Jezebel.
like totally.
Yeah. So he
Violates
wasn't
the
afraid to
community
stand
standards.
up. So I think this is a really helpful conversation, because I do think that this at least this last couple of years, this whole deconstruct, this whole walking away, beyond the normal doubts of just my car broke down and it stinks. No one likes that. But comparing to actual persecution of your life being on the line in India, or underground church in China, or whatever, that's just is a whole different world.
Yeah. So I'm listening to all that, and I'm fascinated by all this. I'm intrigued. I think at one point, Jeff, you were like, does that make sense? Because we were both kind of just sucked into what you were saying, because it's very intriguing. Now you may actually get me to read a book here. Your book. I may actually want to read your book. I'm the only one on this video without books in the background. So I only use Kindle. Is it coming out on Kindle?
Yeah.
Okay, as long as it's on Kindle, I've got it. Right?
Are you preaching a
man.
series, Jeff? Are you going to do a series on doubt? Is that what you had told me?
Yeah, man. Yeah. So what we're going to try this next year, which is basically a couple of, it's pretty soon, is we're going to do a 6-week series based upon each chapter of the book. And that's the challenge, if I can finish the book before then, or, they may coincide. But we're actually bringing Habermas down to speak on emotional doubt, because that's a part of his story as well. His first wife died from cancer, early 40s, an incredible lady. So a lot of his intellectually and emotionally, the roadblocks that he's had to overcome, that God's helped him through, is just really, really connecting across generational lines. It's going to be incredible.
Well, I have no
that
doubt
will definitely be the best message in the series for sure.
I have no doubt you're making progress, because it's further along than when I received the copy that I received, because you've said things that were not in the book before, like the subtitle, for example. My copy that I have in email says still needs subtitle. And so you have a subtitle of the book. So you're making progress. That's great.
That's right. That's a huge deal.
So one of the things we always try to do here, as we're wrapping things up, as we have these conversations, is get extremely practical as we can get. And so I'm thinking through this, and I know one of the questions we were going to dive into is, practically speaking, how can someone who is dealing with doubt right now take steps to overcome them? I actually think, based off of our conversation here today, this could actually go two routes, and not that we're trying to separate or distinguish people from people, but Jeff, I think there's something we could have a conversation about here that's really important. Is maybe there is a leader or a pastor who's listening to the Pastor Pod, and maybe they're experiencing some level of hesitation or doubt. You even said your professor friend that's going to come down and speak. He went through emotional. There are people who are dealing, and they don't know what to do with it, because coming out and expressing it could really put a damper on their leadership. It could do a lot. So I think on one level, there is an aspect where if you're a pastor or a leader in a church and you're dealing with some form of doubt or hesitation, how could you practically encourage them to take steps to deal with that? Would you be able to give any kind of thoughts on what you would say to a pastor or a leader who's listening and saying, hey, I'm wrestling through that? Yeah.
And Jay, man, that's a great question. And we're all familiar with the statistics as well, that we're currently in the time of the Great Resignation. That far exceeds the ministry world, right? It's across every spectrum. People who can retire, even if they're not going to retire at that level, or scooting out a little bit early because they just don't want to deal with what currently is the situation in the workforce. And that's also with pastors. And so if those statistics are anywhere close to the truth, that even if a pastor is not ready to walk away from the faith, many, or close to half, based upon some stats, would like to do something else. And so in terms of practicality, if Habermas is right, and I think he is, and if we find it in scripture, at least two different examples to where there was a hesitation, there was a crash, Elijah and John the Baptist, both of whom were studs.
Right.
Then maybe if I'm experiencing that in my life, let's start there. Mm-hmm. And what's fascinating to me, Jay, is if you go back to 1 Kings 18 and 19, how did God minister to Elijah when Elijah was basically suicidal? He wasn't going to take his life. He asked God to do it because he's still like, I'm not going to do that. You do that.
Right.
What God did, he didn't sit him down and have a lecture on how he need to get his theology right. The angel came to minister, gave him some food, gave him some water, and he slept. Mm-hmm. And then he got up and he got a second meal and he slept again. I think in the scripture, if we ask, and there's going to be some of this in the book, but just walk through a couple of these questions, like on a level of 1 to 10, how well am I managing my physical health? Mm-hmm. How well am I managing my emotional energy? Because if we put ourselves in John the Baptist's shoes and in Elijah's shoes, those guys were absolutely sapped emotionally, physically, mentally. They had run hard and they crashed. So a step would be to try to schedule or seek out some type of a Sabbath. And I'm terrible at this. This is an area I'm trying to grow in to unplug. But maybe a practical ongoing step outside of like, have a Sabbath. And I've even unsubscribed, Josh, you and I have talked about this, from some email list where I feel like every day they're screaming at me, I need to get rest. And I'm stressed out. I'm like, I'm stressed out. Read your email. So thank you for caring about me, but I'm going to just, not read that anymore.
Yeah. Y'all need to
one
chill
thing
out.
Would be, yeah. Calm down. Yeah. But to separate yourself from unwise emotional investments. One of those may be the shows that we watch. I love like war, intense spy shows, but if I'm giving out all day long, coming home, giving out to my wife, my kids, is it wise for me to feel stressed out? And this could even relate to sports. Like, be totally honest, I've been so bit like the last year, the first football game I watched was 2 weeks ago. And I watched the Cowboys like just lose the game when they could have won the game. And guess what? I was ticked off. And I'm sitting there, right? Like, it's at night. I should have already been in bed. I'm like, this. But then I thought, is it wise for me and my level of emotional maturity related to sports to invest here if I'm already really stretched thin? And so, are there some emotional investments that I need to cut out? Craig Rochelle's great in the sense he says, I don't do caffeine past noon because he needs to go to sleep. And so then the other practical, thought suggestion would be Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is honorable, whatever is pure, lovely, just, whatever is commendable, if there's any excellence, anything worthy of praise, think about these things. Because if I'm not managing my health or my emotional energy level well, then when I get a negative email, when I get a call, when I get somebody pull me and said, hey, pastor, I have some thoughts. And you want to say, well, God did say that your thoughts are not my thoughts, but you can't say that right in that moment. That instead of that just being a shot, right, like a kidney punch, it's like devastating because I'm already exhausted, right? It just took the straw to break the camel's back. So if I'm well rested and as best, and we're all getting older, managing my health, my emotions, then the normal hits, the normal grind of ministry may not be as devastating as it otherwise would be.
That's good.
It's very good. So good.
I think one to add to that is talk to somebody. I've got you guys and other friends that I'll call or text and say, hey man, I need to talk to you about something. I need your prayers. And can I run this by you? I'm having these doubts or I've got this situation in my church this, I don't know what to do about this or this leadership question. I think so many times I've done this where I've tried to handle it all in my own power. And so, involve other leaders that can help you process. I'm a processor. I'm fast paced, but I also process slowly sometimes when it comes to these deeper things, or just I'm more of emotional probably than most pastors probably. So I process, so I can tend to react quickly or want to react quickly, but then I'll need to go take time, spend time with the Lord. I'm a verbal processor, so I'll probably talk it out with someone that I trust, and then I'll think about it, and then I'll be healthier. So we're all wired differently, and so knowing how you're wired, and then also talk to somebody.
Yeah. And Josh, that's a great word too, because you would be more of a verbal processor. I think the challenge, and you're very relational by nature, for some of our guys who are a little bit more introspective, once you're done with Bible college or seminary, or once you transition like into church work, it is more of a challenge to have those types of peer connections to where you can actually unload that too. And so if you don't have that, man, I just encourage you, even if, you do associational stuff or denominational stuff, or if you're non-denominational, just even if there's not something in your area, I just encourage you to try to just start something, man. Find 1-2 other guys and just other leaders and just meet maybe once a month and just unload that stuff. Because we all know what it can do if we just try to internalize it.
Right. And I think, the idea of separating yourself and the sabbatical concept, I think that is huge. I think if you're listening and you are in a church leadership role where you have a voice when it comes to taking care of other leaders and giving them the chance to take a break, I want to encourage you to step into that space and give people the opportunity to take a break and separate and to retreat and really get the rest they do need. I'm with you, Jeff, in the fact that I don't do sabbatical very well. My wife will tell you, when I've got a down day, I'm all over the place. That's when I use typically put my hands in other people's cookie jars because I don't know what to do with myself. So resting is something I'm not really, really good at as well. And so
same.
And this idea of, when and you said it earlier, the doubt, hesitation, it often shows up when we're exhausted. And so I look at those two going hand in hand and thinking to myself, okay, if you're not getting the proper rest, this is where these hesitations, these doubts are going to come and begin to creep in, and they're going to hit us before we won't even see it coming. That's the thing, is we're not going to see it coming before we know we're going to go, how do we get here? And so it's better to be proactive than reactive when it comes to this. Josh, this has been great. Jeff, I can't thank you enough for being on the Pastor Pod. Your book, when could we expect the book to be done? What are you thinking? Not to put pressure on you, I know you need to rest. We just talked about this.
Hopefully this next year.
Because here's what I'm thinking is somebody's going to listen to this and they're going to go, and it might be your mom. She might go, hey, I want the book.
Mom will want the book.
Exactly.
Mom.
Well, the other thing is Jeff wrote a book on persuasive apologetics that's already out on Amazon and other places.
But it was deemed too nerdy. So
by who?
It was banned from.
By who?
It was banned. But
that's the one you were going to send to me. Is that the one you were going to send to me?
Yes.
It's a great book.
Yeah.
You just have to read it slowly.
You're just
I'm the type I have to read it slowly over and over again. I'm the slower brother.
I don't give my address out to anybody. Ask Josh. Josh asked me for my address.
I wanted to send him a Christmas card, and he's like, "Here's my PO box," and I'm like, "Send me your address right now. I'm going to send it." He's like, "I don't want your Christmas card," and I'm like,
"It's undisclosed. I don't give my address. I'm very personal." Anyhow, listen, this has been a great conversation with Jeff and
Did you
Josh.
get my Christmas card, by the way? Did you get it?
Are you talking to me?
Yeah. Did you get it?
I only check the PO box like once every 2 weeks.
Jay, just so you know, it's only a matter of time. Josh will find it.
No,
he will find your address.
No, he won't.
Now we'll write you a thank you note.
Now it's getting weird. Now it's just getting weird.
Hashtag persistent.
We need to head off. It's getting weird all of a sudden. So Jeff, thanks so much for your time today. Thanks for spending some time.
Man, thank you guys.
About doubt and this has been great. I want to go on the record saying it hasn't been too nerdy or over my head. It's been fantastic. I know people are going to benefit from even just opening up the conversation. They'll benefit even more when they get your book when it comes out. And so we'll be sure to let people know when that's taking place. So that being said, from Josh and myself and our guest Jeff, we thank you for spending some time with us on the Pastor Pod. Reach out to us, thepastorpod@gmail.com, and we hope to see you back real soon.